The sun bled orange across the dry hills as Clara sat on the porch, chin tucked, blood crusted on her lip. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, one sandal missing, arms trembling in silence. The wind moved through the dry weeds like it was whispering warnings. Behind her, the screen door creaked open, slow. Bootsteps, heavy, mean. "You speak when I say you can." Her stepfather slurred, the stink of whiskey trailing him like smoke. "Open your mouth again. I'll sew it shut myself." Clara didn't look up. Her eye was already swelling shut. She'd spoken too much already, just a few words in protest when he tried to trade her for 2 bottles of rye and a sack of coins. Said she was too mouthy for her own good. The gambler had laughed. The stepfather didn't. She'd been backhanded into the porch rail, splinters digging into her spine. That was hours ago. Since then, no one came. Not the neighbor, not the preacher's wife, not even the sheriff who rode past with eyes fixed on the horizon. But one man did see her. Eli McCrae. He sat atop his wagon, reins in hand, hat pulled low, but he saw her. Their eyes met for just a heartbeat as he passed. He didn't stop, just kept driving. The stepfather yanked Clara to her feet. She gasped, knees buckling. "You're done talking, girl. Next sound out of you better be a prayer." He dragged her across the dirt yard, tied her to the fence post with rope that cut into her wrists. There she stayed as the sun dropped and the wind turned cold. He slammed the door behind him. Night came fast out here. Coyotes howled in the distance. Stars blinked overhead like far-off eyes. Her breath fogged out in thin streams. She wanted to cry, but her body wouldn't give her the tears. Then she heard it. Wheels over gravel, slow, steady. A horse exhaled. A boot hit the ground. A silhouette stood just beyond the fence line, tall, still. Eli. He didn't say a word. But the lantern in his hand lit her face, and his eyes. They burned, like someone who'd seen this before. Like someone who wasn't gonna let it happen again. The desert didn't wake gently, it snapped open with heat. By mid-morning, Clara was choking on dust, hands tied behind her, throat burning dry. The gambler had laughed as he shoved her onto the wild Mustang. "She'll bake before the buzzards get her." The stepfather didn't laugh. He just spat and said, "Let the sand teach her silence." They'd ridden her out deep, past the red ridges into the cracked belly of the land where nothing moved but shadows. Then they'd cut her loose, kicked her to the ground like a sack of meat, and rode off. Now she lay half-conscious beneath a sun so bright it felt like judgment. Her lips blistered, her vision blurred. Flies crawled at the corners of her mouth. She tried to scream once. Nothing came out. Time stopped meaning anything. The light pulsed and flickered. She saw her mother's face, soft, blurred, smiling like an old memory. The wind moaned through the canyon, low and cruel. Somewhere nearby, a snake slid across the rocks. Buzzards circled. She could hear the wings, or maybe she imagined it. Then, a tremble in the earth. Hooves, slow, measured. A shadow fell across her face. She blinked. Eli. He knelt beside her, the edge of his coat brushing the dirt, hand outstretched but steady. What did they do? His voice cracked, not from weakness, but from rage so tight it barely made sound. Clara's head lolled forward. Eli cut the rope from her wrists with a hunting knife. His hands were rough, but careful. "Easy now," he murmured. "I got you." She tried to speak. "Don't," he said. "Save your voice." He pulled a canteen from his saddle, held it to her lips. The water stung going down, sharp as glass, but it was real. He wrapped her in his coat, lifted her with a grunt. She didn't weigh much, too little for a girl who once danced in town square. Eli looked out across the empty desert. "They left you here like an animal." He mounted the horse, her body slumped against him, and turned back toward the hills. Wind picked up behind them. The buzzards scattered. and the desert watched in silence as the girl they thought would die was carried home. The ranch house stood quiet beneath a slate sky, lanterns flickering in the windows like distant stars. Inside, the fire crackled low. Eli carried Clara through the threshold without a word, boots thudding across the wooden floor. She stirred faintly in his arms, breath shallow, skin ice-cold despite the desert heat still clinging to her hair. He laid her on the old settee near the stove, hands moving with the slow discipline of a man who'd once done this before. He folded a thick wool blanket around her, tucking it tight at the shoulders but not gently, no softness, just purpose, his jaw locked. "You ain't dying in my house," he muttered. Clara blinked awake, throat raw, lips cracked. Her voice was barely there. "Thank you." Eli stopped. His eyes flared, not with anger, but something deeper. Guilt. Memory. "Don't thank me," he said flatly. "Ain't done nothing worth it yet." He stood, grabbed a kettle, and poured hot water into a basin. Steam rose, fogging the corners of the room. He soaked a rag and pressed it gently to the bruises on her face. She winced, but didn't pull away. "I had a wife once," he said quietly, not looking at her. "She had eyes like yours. Fire under frost." Clara didn't speak. "She spoke out too," he added. "Didn't end well for her." The silence between them settled heavy. Out on the porch, the floorboards groaned. A ranch hand appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, face tight. "Boss," he said. "Man came into town asking about her. Said she ran off. Said he'd come collect what's his." Eli's hand balled into a fist. "He's still there?" The hand nodded. "Drunk as hell. Said he's riding back this way come sunrise." Eli didn't answer. "We're right away." He stared at the fire like it owed him something. Then, without turning around, he spoke. "Load the rifles. No one rides up this ranch without permission." The door creaked shut behind the hand. Clara stared at the flames, eyes flickering gold. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but she didn't. And Eli, he didn't push. Some wounds didn't need words. Not yet. The night air clung heavy, scented with dust and whiskey. A wagon wheel groaned in the distance, rattling across the gravel road. The stepfather had returned, swaggering in with a shotgun across his lap and two men trailing behind him, shadows tall and mean under the lantern light. "Clara," he bellowed, voice thick with liquor. "Come on, girl. You're coming home." Clara trembled where she sat by the fire, hands pressed against her knees. Her lip was purple, her dress still torn. She didn't speak. Eli stepped forward, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other. His boots crunched against the dirt. "She ain't yours no more." His voice was low, steady, carrying the weight of someone who'd faced down death and won. The stepfather laughed, a dry, hollow sound. "We'll see what the sheriff says. He can't save her from me." "Not tonight, not ever again," Eli said, lifting the rifle just slightly, enough for the beam of the lantern to catch the metal. The men froze. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Dust swirled around their boots. Horses stamped in the background, uneasy. "You think you can keep what's mine?" the stepfather spat, pointing a trembling finger at Clara. "She's mine. Always will be." Eli's jaw tightened. He didn't flinch. The lantern cast sharp lines across his face, shadows deep as the canyon. "Not yours. Not now. Not ever." For a long moment, silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of the ranch fire and the rasp of the wind through the wooden posts. The stepfather's grin faltered. His men shifted, unease creeping in, sensing the cold certainty in Eli's stance. Finally, the stepfather spat to the side, muttered something under his breath, and turned his horse. The men followed. The gate creaked, wheels rattled over the gravel, and the dark figures disappeared into the night. Clara exhaled, though no sound left her lips. Her body sagged with relief, yet her eyes remained fixed on the door. Eli lowered his rifle, breathing heavy, lantern swinging slightly. "He'll be back," he said, voice rough. "And he won't come alone." Clara pressed her fingers to her lips, silent. She didn't need to speak. The ranch walls seemed to embrace her, a fragile fortress against a cruel world. Outside, the desert wind whispered across the hills, carrying with it the promise of more danger. But inside, for the first time in hours, Clara felt the faintest spark of hope. The night was far from over, but somebody, was finally on her side. Dawn broke slow over the hills, brushing the ranch with pale gold. Eli rode into town, boots heavy in the stirrups, dust curling behind him like smoke from a fire. He passed shuttered windows and yawning streets, every step echoing the weight of what had happened. At the sheriff's office, a gray-bearded man looked up from the ledger, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. Sheriff Tolan didn't speak at first. He listened as Eli recounted the night, the threats, the bruises, the desert, the rope. His hands rested on the desk, veins visible, steady despite the fury simmering beneath. "I need more than your word," the sheriff said finally. "That man's got friends. Ain't gonna be easy." Clara sat just behind Eli, small in the doorway, fingers curled around the edges of her coat. Her lips pressed tight. Her voice didn't come, not yet. Trauma had stolen it, left her silent in its place. She watched Eli stand firm, jaw tight, hands knuckles white on the reins of his resolve. The preacher's wife stepped forward, wringing, her apron, voice quiet but clear. "I saw her," she said. "I heard the screams." Eyes met the sheriff's. "This girl's telling the truth." Sheriff Tolan's gaze softened, but the weight of duty didn't leave his shoulders. "I'll gather the posse tonight," he said. "But Eli, be ready. He won't come alone." Clara's heart thudded in her chest, a rhythm she couldn't yet name. Relief mingled with fear. The stepfather's shadow lingered everywhere, in every sunbeam, every flicker of movement. She pressed her palm to her mouth, biting down the tremor. Eli knelt beside her as they left the office, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he said softly, "just by surviving." The streets were quiet now. A rooster crowed somewhere in the distance, the only sound outside the wind stirring the dry leaves. Horses stamped, echoing the heartbeat of the land. Eli's eyes scanned the horizon, anticipating the coming storm. The posse would ride soon, lanterns swinging in the dark, rifles ready, justice waiting. But even as hope stirred, Clara understood the danger wasn't gone. She didn't speak, but her gaze hardened. One day she would tell her story. One day she would speak again. For now she held on to Eli's hand, the rough leather of his gloves grounding her. The sheriff's promise hung in the air, a fragile thread between fear and safety. Somewhere in the distance the stepfather laughed, unaware that the law, and a man who refused to let evil win, was already closing in. The horizon promised reckoning, and Clara, silent but unbroken, waited for it. The night pressed down on the ranch like a living thing, thick with dust and the scent of hay. Torches flickered along the fence line, casting long, jittering shadows. Eli walked slowly, boots crunching against gravel, rifle resting on his shoulder. Clara moved beside him, still pale, still quiet, eyes sharp and alert. The wind carried voices before the men appeared, a low, drunken chorus, hooves scraping against the dirt, the clank of metal. The stepfather had returned, and this time he hadn't come alone. 4 rough men staggered behind him, lanterns swaying, faces hidden beneath hats soaked in moonlight and malice. Clara's stomach twisted as she saw them set the shed ablaze. Flames licked the wood, smoke curling toward the stars. A ranch hand tried to fight back, only to be shoved into the dirt. His cry echoed and died under the roar of fire and fury. Eli's jaw tightened. "Stay behind me," he growled, voice low and steady, cutting through the chaos. His rifle rose, catching the first lantern in a beam of light. Shadows danced and flickered as the men laughed, thinking fear would paralyze him. Clara's hands trembled, but she reached for the rifle, leaning against the wall. Her fingers closed around it like it was a lifeline. She lifted it carefully, took aim, not at a man, but at the sky. One sharp crack split the night. The laughter faltered. Heads turned. The wind seemed to still for a heartbeat. Eli moved like a shadow himself, boots silent against the dirt, a rifle in one hand, a fist ready in the other. He struck the nearest outlaw with precision, sending him sprawling into the dust. Clara kept firing into the air, each shot a warning, a flare of defiance. The stepfather's eyes widened, rage and fear tangled in the lantern light. He motioned to his men, but something in the way Eli's shoulders squared, in the rhythm of the rifles and hooves, made even the bravest hesitate. From the hills, another sound rose, hooves pounding, voices calling. Sheriff Tolan and the posse arrived, torches blazing, rifles ready. The outlaws faltered, caught between the fury of Eli and the law's advancing shadow. For the first time that night, the stepfather looked uncertain. Flames crackled behind him. Dust swirled around their boots. And in the center of it all, Clara stood firm, rifle in hand, heart beating like a drum, ready to fight or survive the night. The first rays of dawn hadn't touched the hills yet when the sound of hooves thundered over the gravel. Sheriff Tolan and his deputies appeared like ghosts out of the darkness, lanterns swinging, rifles leveled, eyes cold and unwavering. The gang had no time to react, trapped between Eli and the law. Eli's boots dug into the dirt as he advanced, fists tight, rifle slung low but ready. One outlaw moved too quickly. A shot rang out, Eli's arm grazed by a bullet, but he didn't falter. He tackled the man to the ground, boots stamping dust, fists driving the law into the chaos. Clara, pale but steady, gripped her rifle with both hands. Her finger hovered over the trigger, eyes fixed on her stepfather. He stumbled back, face pale, lips quivering. The men around him faltered, unsure, shadows of fear flickering in their eyes. "Please," the stepfather croaked, voice breaking for the first time. I'll never speak again." Eli's gaze met the sheriff's, hard and unyielding. Without hesitation, he grabbed a blanket from the wagon, folding it harshly, tossing it toward the deputies. "Wrap him in that," Eli said, voice tight with fury. "Keep the devil warm till trial." The posse froze at the words, a silence hanging over the dust and smoke, broken only by the rattle of the dying fire from the shed. Clara stepped forward, still holding the rifle, her voice quiet but firm. "Don't kill him. Just let him rot." The outlaws looked at one another, the weight of justice pressing down. The stepfather, for the first time, realized his threats had failed, his power gone, replaced by the law and the courage of the girl he had tried to break. Eli's arm brushed against Clara's shoulder, a brief, grounding touch. He didn't speak. Words Rent needed. The sheriff's deputies moved swiftly, binding the remaining men, loading them into the wagon. Dust hung in the air, curling around boots, rifles, and lanterns like smoke from a battle low.